Okay, so I'm going to cover two topics actually today. When it comes to compliance, typically two types of questions that customers have. One is, how secure is GitLab as a product really? And then how can GitLab help to achieve compliance, right? So I'm going to cover both of them today in brief, and then maybe we can have some questions towards the end. So the first topic is around trust and security at GitLab. You might have recently seen that we just achieved the SOC 2 Type 1 certification, or we have the report. So essentially, what is the SOC 2 certification? So it's a third-party agency which kind of validates on 5 basic trust principles. We got the report on security trust principle. We got the certification on the security trust principle. So type 1 normally looks at the design of the product, and type 2 looks at the operating efficiencies, right? So we've received the type 1 report, and we are continuing to pursue the type 2 as we move into F21. That said, what does it mean to your customer? So normally such reports from third-party agencies are quite sought after by customers when they have their security teams requesting them to validate if a vendor actually meets a bunch of their requirements from a company point of view. So this report can then be provided to the customer rather than us, answering each of the security questions that they may have. Typically, this report might cover most of the questions, and then, it kind of reduces the load on our security department to answer just the differential questions that might be required, right? So this is an industry baseline. It can only be given to customers under NDA. So once we know that a current customer or a prospect is under NDA, then we can request it from the security team. The process is actually all in this handbook page. So I'm going through the presentation, but for each of these topics, the related handbook page is in the notes. I'm going through the presentation primarily because it's easier to kind of sort through this, but all of this information is already in the handbook page. The second type of questionnaire that we have access to and which we can give customers is the CAIQ questionnaire. Again, it is in an industry standard security questionnaire, answers most of the questions that a customer might have. Things like, how often do we test our products? Things like how do we audit our product? Whether we do a code quality, whether we do security, there are tons of questions that come under this questionnaire. So GitLab CAIQ is available at this link, so you can actually go and I might have that open over here, which I may not be sharing, but we can actually go and view GitLab's questionnaire right over here. And as you can see, we address most of the questions. The next compliance is the PCI compliance. A lot of you might be familiar with this. So any SaaS vendor that is accepting credit card payments typically has to show compliance to PCI. Normally, there are 4 levels of compliance based on the number of transactions that a vendor is running. Level 1 is upwards of 6 million transactions, and level 4 is below 20,000 transactions. So GitLab is currently at level 4. So we've actually received that compliance for level 4, wherein we have to actually do a self-assessment as well as do a quarterly scan by a third-party vendor. Now, again, this report is available. If your customer asks for it, you can request it from the security team through this mail ID. And the fourth one is the GitLab control framework. So there are a lot of industry regulations available: SOC 2, ISO, PCI, FedRAMP, HIPAA, so on. A lot of times, some of the specifications in various of these frameworks actually are common. So Adobe actually came out with a common control framework, which kind of consolidates a lot of the requirements from each of these frameworks and gives a common framework. So our GitLab control framework is based on this control framework, and we cover, about 15 to 20 controls that I've listed down here below. So if you actually go to the handbook page, you can really see for each of these controls, there are various different criteria that are defined, and how GitLab kind of classifies each of this, and for which particular framework does it match, right? So for example, this particular control framework, which is the data classification criteria, it tries to explain how we classify the data, and it kind of maps to the SOC 2, and we also list out the specific requirements. So this is something that if your customer is interested, can share it with them, for how we handle some of these requirements as well. And then the last one that I'll talk about from a trust and security point of view is external testing, and penetration testing is one of them. So we do an annual penetration testing for both .com as well as the self-hosted product. And it's done by a third-party vendor called Grim, and the report again is available from our security team. So that was about trust and security of GitLab as a product. And now we're gonna cover how we help customers manage compliance for their operations, right? So our main goal, so in general, audit and compliance actually is a lot of headache. Auditors actually tend to get a lot of pain by doing audits, primarily because data is split across multiple different tools. It's not consolidated. They don't even know if they actually have that particular data, right? So the goal of GitLab's compliance management is to really make this whole process simple, friendly, and as frictionless as possible. And the way we try to do it is any kind of compliance management solution really requires to have three key pillars, so to say. One is you need to be able to define the rules and policies, so that we do under policy management. The second, you need to be able to enforce the policies that you're already defined, and that's what we talk about in automating compliance workflows. And then the third is, once you've defined and enforced it, when an auditor is requesting for proof of compliance, you actually need to be able to report on it. And that's what we will cover under audit management, under that pillar. Speaking about policy management, which is actually where we define the rules and policies. In general, the typical rules and policies that may be required are, how do we manage our passwords? Are we performing segregation of duties? Are we making sure that only users with the right credentials are able to access the product or not? Are the right users being able to, do we have approval rules, and are we able to allow the right users to push into the product or not, right? So these are some of the rules that a customer might want to define, and we have various different features that kind of cover some of those. So we have we do offer granular user roles and permissions. We have 5 different user roles. We also have an additional auditor role that is required. And these are based on the role that a person plays rather than what access that the person requires, right? So we're able to define most of these rules in both the self-hosted and the .com product. Then there is the compliance setting, which actually helps to create some of these rules, create the approval rules. How many approvers do we need for merge requests and so on? So all of these kind of fall under compliance settings. Credential inventory is primarily for the self-managed product, where you can keep track of the credentials that can access the GitLab instances. And then we have the protected branches, which kind of maintain who can create a branch, delete a branch, modify a branch, or push into a branch. So the permissions and approvers for such branches are actually defined for protected branches itself. So from a roadmap point of view, and we will talk about some of this in the next section as well. So one of the things that from a policy management point of view, you want to do is set labels and be able to apply compliance settings based on specific labels, right? So for example, if a customer wants to look at PCI as a framework, so you should be able to set PCI as a label for multiple different projects, and then the compliance settings for each of those projects we should be able to allow the customer to set. So that's one of the things that we want to allow the customer to do. The second thing is, rather than having granular project level compliance settings, also would like to have instance and group levels of compliance settings, so that it becomes easier to restrict users from performing certain operations at a much higher level, rather than defining it at every single project within a group or within an instance. And then actions based on the company policy that also aligns with being able to set policies based on specific types of projects that that the customer might be interested in. The second key pillar that we spoke about was the ability to enforce rules and policies. So in this, on this front, so there are a bunch of frameworks that are available. Of course, currently we don't support all of them, but the first steps in this front have been started from the last release, where the first one is we've been able to define framework-specific project templates. So for example, the HIPAA framework specific template has been defined in 12.10, wherein the 180 odd requirements that are actually required to be compliant to HIPAA are actually created as 180 different issues, and there is a project template that is created. So a customer who wants to track compliance to HIPAA can use that, rather than using spreadsheets, tracking each of tracking each compliance requirement on a spreadsheet. This makes it a lot more collaborative. They can actually also then add various different proof elements into the issues itself as they're going on with their day-to-day operations, right? The goal is, which I'll talk about in the next slide, the goal is to have various such project templates specific to compliance frameworks, and then automating the workflows for those frameworks as well as we move along. The next one is framework specific project labels. So to be able to apply a label to projects, and then eventually be able to apply common compliance settings to each of these project labels is the goal, so that you don't have to for every single project that is compliant to a specific framework, let's say like HIPAA, you don't have to go to each of those projects and set the compliance rules for those itself, right? So that's where we want to go. With 12.1, we introduced the capability where you can actually set some of these project labels on the projects itself. Excuse me. From a roadmap point of view, so far, like I said, we've introduced the HIPAA framework. SOX and SOC 2 are the next frameworks that that we intend to go forward with. And then the next, the other aspect from a workflow point of view is to be able to detect compliance breaches within the pipeline itself, and the pipeline results or the MR will show the success or failure of from a compliance point of view as well. So that's coming up next from an enforcement point of view. The third one is to report on whatever rules and policies that have been enforced. So basically things like who took an action, whether the action was allowed, whether it was compliant, were they approved to take that particular action, are there gaps from what was defined to what was actually done. So a bunch of these questions tend to be asked when a compliance auditor is auditing the organization. So in that regard, there are a couple of features that that are applicable. So the first one is the audit events, which actually captures various different project group and user level actions in the audit events itself, which we can extract through UI or API. And then there is the audit log system as well as the system logs, which actually capture everything that is actually done within a GitLab instance. And then the compliance dashboard, which the goal is to actually show a consolidated view of all the compliance actions, and we should be able to filter based on what requirement we have. Currently, it shows the most recently merged activity, who are the approvers, and so on. But we'll talk about the roadmap in a little bit. From an audit management roadmap point of view, the first phase was to consolidate everything in one place. So I think that's something that's done. Going forward, the ability to export audit events and logs is the immediate next step. To export user permissions and by project and group. Audit reports are something that's in the roadmap, which is not even started. Basically, it is giving a report of everything, all user actions, or all MR approvals, or things like that, right? So there are a set of defined reports that we want to chase after, and that's something that will come as a part of the roadmap. So from a compliance dashboard point of view, like I said, today, it actually shows the latest merge request activity and who was the approver for that merge request. But the vision of the compliance dashboard itself is to actually show pretty much everything from a compliance point of view. So how many projects we have configured for each of the frameworks, and what is the compliance status on each of those frameworks, right? What is the license compliance status? What is we can add specific data points with regards to pipeline results, security results, and so on. So today there could be some of these compliance data spread across, let's say, a security dashboard, a compliance dashboard. There could be a separate analytics dashboard. The goal of the compliance dashboard is to give a way to pull all of this information together by issue, by merge requests, by projects, also by specific frameworks, so that an auditor will get a consolidated look and feel of the report itself, and also be able to filter, based on either user or approver or something, and then also then export that particular report. So that's where the goal is. We do have one at the moment, one customer who's actually claimed that GitLab actually helped them from a compliance point of view. That's Chorus, where in fact they were using our APIs to actually pull out all the information that they required. But there is a reference customer which talks about compliance itself. This is my last slide. So compliance as a capability, there are multiple different things that we are tracking. Where each of those lies. So under the policy management, where we define the rules and policies, most of it is available in core, except for the credential inventory, which is available in Ultimate. In the protected branches, some capabilities are available in Premium, which is, excuse me. Some capabilities are available in Premium, which is specifically saying that approval can only be by the code owner, can be configured, and that feature is available in Premium. But pretty much everything else is in the core itself. In the enforcement part of it, where we have both the templates and labels, which is where we're doing some significant amount of work, both of which are in Ultimate. Amongst the reporting part of it, which is the audit events, logs, and compliance dashboard, they're spread across Starter, Premium, and Ultimate. Again, here, the goal is to have the compliance dashboard as a consolidated view of all compliance-related activity, and that capability is planned for the Ultimate here itself. So with that, I will stop here.
So it looks like we have our first question in the document from Tim. Would you like to ask her the question verbally, Tim?
Yeah. First off, I come from a customer site that had a lot of different compliance regulations, and I'm super excited about what this is offering our customers. So great work so far. My question, do we have any plans for proper segregation of duties? A common auditing requirement in segregation of duties is that approvers or deployers should never be able to contribute to the code base. We currently have two approval deployer constructs. The first one is merge request approvals. The second one is playing jobs that deploy to protected environments. Both of those roles, so in order to be a merge request approver or a job player for a particular environment, you have to at least be developer in order to do those things. And moreover, the playing of a job requires you to have either merge or push access to the protected branch, meaning that the deployer has the potential to both contribute, push code and deploy code, which completely breaks the whole construct of separate segregation of duties.
Right. So I know that there is some work being done on the segregation of duties. I had spoken Matt. I don't know if he's on the call. Matt Gonzalez, who is the product manager for compliance itself. I know there is an issue that tracks that as well, but I don't have a concrete timeline on that, Tim. So let me check on that and get back to you on when that's happening.
Thank you. Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah.
All right, next question was from Daryl.
Hi, folks. We had a call earlier today, and this exact issue came up, so the timing couldn't be better. It was around HIPAA, and they were essentially asking for some direction from GitLab on how they could not necessarily build applications that were HIPAA compliant, but they do have some already in place HIPAA tools that that they would like to possibly integrate into our CI pipeline. So the question is essentially, do we have an integration into an external compliance tool from the CI pipeline that we could reference that we've already done? Does anybody have an example of that?
So as far as I know, there is no out-of-the-box integration available. I think the recommended approach was to export, when we have the export capability, to export the data into another GRC tool.
Okay.
At the moment, that's not available. I'll have to check if that's even in the roadmap. I don't think it's on the roadmap, but let me check and get back to you.
Okay, yeah, thank you so much. They have some pretty sophisticated GRC tools that they essentially would like to, take some of the artifacts out, for example, and run those through, some already tools, right? So, yeah, cool. We talked about the
like I said, the whole, I think that's, yeah. Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, we could use our API, for example. And make calls out to that GRC tool, for example, right, in the pipeline. So that was our answer. I just was wondering if we had, some other examples that we could reference. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, that's it for the questions in the notes document. Any other questions we have for Soumya?
Yeah, thanks, John. This is Hayden. I was just looking at the compliance page on the website that's a subset of our solutions page. There's a demo in there from 2018, which talks about the security dashboard. Wondering, there's some really good stuff in today's presentation, Soumya, thank you. Wondering if we could get a demo, updated demo on this page.
Yeah, so incidentally, I updated the page yesterday and didn't have a demo in place to update the video. So I'm going to have that updated pretty soon.
No problem. Yeah, I saw the updates to the page. I was on there the other week and this wasn't on there. So thank you very much. Yeah.
All right. So we are about out of time. I do have a question for the group, though, for those of you who are still here. The field enablement team is looking for a couple volunteers, particularly account executive or Sal, who would like to have a brief 15-minute coffee chat and review some upcoming learning paths that we're going to be releasing. So I have a place in this notes document if you'd like to sign up to take a look at this and give us your feedback. We would love to hear your thoughts on that. Any other questions for Samya before we go ahead and end the session?
Yeah, one more. This is Daryl. Can we share? Is this slide deck shareable, or is this internal?
It's not really internal. Most of it is available in the handbook page, so it's definitely shared.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I'm looking for this presentation as we speak, and I'm struggling to locate it. Any way somebody could put it in the chat window, please?
It's in the issue, Larry.
Is it?
Yeah.
I'll make sure that it's added.
Larry, you got it, brother. I sent it to you.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it. Thanks all. Thank you, Sunya.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Hope you all have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks.